Thank you so much.
No
Uh,
problem. Ready when you are.
yes. Thank you so much for speaking to me. This documentary, it was amazing.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
it we talked about how it was a companion piece to BMF, but what I really loved was the assembling of the ensemble players. Can you talk about the importance of that? Because we have the brothers, but it's really a whole collective.
Yeah, it is. It took a lot of research first and foremost, and it's a lot like again, building trust with cast members. That's step one, and that's always sort of my first approach before trying to book interviews. We really want to establish a rapport and a trust. So when the cameras are rolling, it just feels natural, and it's something that I really take seriously in shooting. Especially people that have gone through traumatic experiences. You really have to kind of build a trust, and once you're kind of in the inner circle, it becomes a little easier because you're kind of vouched for, and then it becomes a little bit of a snowball effect where the more trust you build, the more people want to step forward and talk to you. Obviously, there's a lot of characters that we couldn't get to.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of people that were sort of skeptical about the whole project, and we are dealing with criminal enterprises and activity, so it's not in everybody's best interest to talk about it. So I understand the trepidation for most people as well.
Do you feel this was a companion piece to the series that we have? But I wanted to know, was it important that you refuted some of the things of the series because it was changed for dramatic purposes? There are characters who are actually still alive. So did you want to pinpoint that out and show the differences?
It's an interesting question because we didn't set out to debunk any moments in the scripted series or anything like that. We just understood that there were dramatic beats that we wanted to cover. Obviously, um, Meech, but we also didn't want to. It is a sort of, it's an interesting predicament to be in because you don't want to give away too much, to the scripted series, but at the same time, we were tasked to basically tell the entire story. So if it is a spoiler, if there are some spoilers there, well, it's unfortunate, but I think it's we were tasked to tell the whole story, and we were kind of just looking at the very big dramatic moments, and when you look at someone's life and timeline, that's where you can kind of really dig into those page turning moments, whether it's being incarcerated or being shot or losing a loved one. Those are dramatic moments that you have to build your story around, and so if they coincide with the scripted series, it's just because they were real dramatic moments in Meech and Terry's life that we felt compelled to cover.
Right. Now, what was really interesting about the operation, especially when they first started, this, as you stated before, was not built upon violence. And so, do you feel that that is why they had not necessarily a long power, but they were most affected?
Yeah, again, it's a personality. I think a lot of it is a personality thing too. I mean, the way they operated, I think, and just again from my own experience with Meech, you know, he strikes me as a person that brings out the best in people, and violence would have to be a very, 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 very last resort in order to, if something goes extremely wrong. And I think, he says it in the documentary. He's like, look, it's better to be with us than against us, because it's more profitable to be with us than against us. In other words, if you take my kindness for weakness, well, then you're cut out, and then you lose money. And that's, that is sort of where I think the guiding light for that organization was, it wasn't necessarily about being the meanest gangsters on the block. They wanted to make money. their whole objective was to make money and to provide. You know, they had a lot of people in their inner circle, and they helped a lot of people, and that's one thing that should be noted, is that Meech put, you know, countless people through college and helped businesses, and um, I mean, yes, it was nefarious, it was illegal, but at the same time, there was this entrepreneurial spirit that he wanted to give back how he felt he could.
Kind of piggybacking off of what you just said about the people that they helped. It was a business and reached plenty of other people positively, even though it was negative what they was doing. Can you
Sure.
talk about the kind of the downfall of when the group really started to get investigated and people were going to jail? How did that impact the city of Atlanta and Detroit?
Well, Detroit was sort of, you know, in their rear view mirror by the time they were indicted. I mean, you know, at that point, Terry was in Los Angeles, and Meech was in Atlanta. However, you know, they were the, you know, in many ways the beating heartbeat of Atlanta's nightlife and social scene. You know, I mean, like, so countless restaurants. You know, you have to think about how the money was trickling down. It was, you know, in restaurants, clubs, you know, strip clubs. You know, it really was everywhere they went. They spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. Like, if you can imagine, there must have been, you know, it was. I mean, you know, they at the very end, I think we interviewed T.I. and some of the other folks that were just like, man, it was just a different city when when Meech got, it was like a dark cloud kind of like spread over Atlanta, and it was just a different city after Meech was arrested and BMF was gone.
Right. How do you get inside? It's very easy to create a narrative, but you also create personalities, especially when you have one of the brothers who's in jail. So how do you kind of craft that story where we get the full personality instead of people just talking and telling us things?
Well, I mean, I think you have, when you have such a major personality, like Meech, you know, it isn't hard. You know, you kind of you sort of set the table, but, you know, let him lead the way. You know, you kind of, you know, he's very giving with his story, and I think the thing about what's interesting is that everybody has told Meech's story except for Meech. You know, if you go on YouTube right now, there's a million YouTube videos about Meech, and hardly any of them have, you know, Meech actually talking about his own life. You know, it's all third, you know, third person, and so this is a unique opportunity to hear it straight from his mouth. And you know, he just has that charismatic personality that I think, you know, people are going to be drawn to. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, yes.
Sorry.
What was also really interesting was the fact that we got the side of the police officers and the detectives who worked the case. There was a sense of, we obviously want to put them in jail, but there's a sense of respect of what they were able to accomplish. Um, with that, did you kind of sense that as they was telling their stories? And was that something that you wanted to highlight? Well, these are criminal activities, but it was so kind of remarkable how they were able to kind of map out and take over the United States.
Yeah, and I think it was a discovery process for law enforcement as well. You know, I don't think it was, because look, there was, you know, they weren't a perfect organization. There was violence associated with BMF, even if it was on, not even in the inner circle, but the outer circle, there was still violence associated with BMF. And, you know, even if, you know, it was a complicated cat and mouse game, but these police were really dedicated. I mean, they worked just as hard. I mean, they worked 24/7 to put this case together, you know, and I think it's you know, to show that side of it as well. You know, as hard as Terry and Meech were working to build this organization and to, you know, to make a mark, law enforcement was working equally as hard, you know, with sort of momentum against them in a lot of ways, you know, and in episode 4, we kind of go into this, you know, we introduce law enforcement into the series and their perspective. And it's at the height of BMF where Meech is starting the label and putting up billboards that this sort of really takes the turn for police. It's a motivate. It's like, oh, how dare he? He's putting up BMF billboards taunting us, and that becomes the extra battery in their back to bring the organization down. Which yeah, again, it's this sort of it's almost like Shakespearean. This sort of this character. He can't help himself, but he has to taunt the police with these billboards, and his brother, being the cautious one, is always sort of like Chris was saying earlier, kind of in the shadows, the quiet one, warning against this, but he just can't help it.
Do you view that kind of the boastfulness is what helped to contribute to bring them down? If probably they had kind of the same calm personality of not wanting to be out in the open so much, especially with the billboards, would have kind of saved them?
No, I think they would. I think they were eventually going to be, because I mean, ironically, as much as Meech was the centerpiece and and as lavish and as boastful as he was the more cautious one out of the two. He didn't speak on phones. He wasn't involved in any transactions at all. It was Terry. It was Terry that was caught on the wire, and his associates that were caught on the wire. And so, I mean, how do you like? I mean, that's irony, right? God loves irony, and that's that kind of, it shows the it shows the two personalities and how it would have happened anyway. I think it would have. I don't think Jack and the law enforcement side of the story needed any more motivation. They knew that they were going to go after them full throttle. I mean, for them, the big ticket thing was how to connect Meech. How to because they had Terry in pocket for a while before they went after Meech.
So yeah. Oh, sorry.
No. It was also it was interesting to me because I didn't understand. Again, there wasn't a smoking gun with this case. There, a CCE is a conspiracy. It's years and years of building evidence. And when when the case finally went to trial, or didn't go to trial, but when it was adjudicated, there was it was basically the life story of Meech and Terry. It starts all the way back from Detroit and ends in Detroit. I mean, in Atlanta. And so there's no, it's interesting how law enforcement were able to put these pieces of the puzzle together, and how dedicated they were. Some of it was as small as, tying a cell phone receipt to an organization member, getting a stop. It was a very long and arduous task to bring this organization down, and you have to kind of applaud law enforcement for sticking with it for so long.
They, despite their short run, they were still in entertainment in terms of we're still talking about them. We have now a documentary about them. We have a TV show. Why do you think they didn't just fade into the spotlight once it all ended?
That's a very good question. I think first of all, the fact that they were so involved with music sort of gives it that extra panache that maybe other organizations didn't have. I mean, this isn't new to hip hop or even the music industry. The criminal element has always sort of been associated with hip hop labels and other music labels even before hip hop. So that's not a new story, but I think the fact that Meech was this larger than life figure, I mean, he's in the same breath you could say John Gotti, Big Meech, I mean, they write songs about him, so he does have that sort of larger than life personality, and I think that's sort of why it still resonates to this day.
For the new generation that is being introduced to this, what should the legacy be of both this documentary and BMF?
It's hard for me to say. I'm a storyteller. I think you know, I try to tell a truthful story whenever I, you know, especially in documentary, you have to really try to be objective and try to show both sides of the coin. And I think it's up to the viewer to make their own judgment on whether, you know, how that influences their outlook on the subject. But it is a rise and fall story. You know, it is not. Nobody rides off into the sunset in this story. You know, it's a tragic story because there was so much potential with these brothers, and the family. And again, it's a story about struggle and getting by any means out of their situation in a city that was failing them, in a system that was failing them, and their version of what the American dream could be, and their ambition to get there. And I think, you know, it's a complicated story that I don't think, you know, if you watch it in its entirety, I don't think you know, I want to ask more questions than answer, if that makes any sense. You know, it should, I hope to create a conversation as opposed to just walking away with one sort of feeling or, you know, one sort of point of view or position on the topic. I feel like good documentaries should start conversations and open up conversations.
As the director for this, what would you say has been your greatest lesson that you've learned?
It's a very good question. I think for me, you know, the challenge was to really be embedded in a story, in their story, right, and really dedicate time and effort to understand their position and build that trust. Again, it all comes down to trust. It really does. You know, if you don't have that bond and that relationship with your subjects, or if they don't trust you, you're not going to find an authentic voice. And so that was my first step, and I think the most important step was to build a bond and trust with the subject matters. And some folks were just like, roll the cameras, let's go. And other folks took a lot of, you know, it was like a mental chess game in a lot of ways to get you know, people to talk. I mean, there's, you know, I remember one of the subjects was just like, I don't talk about any of this stuff ever, especially in front of cameras. And so he just like froze, you know, he's just like, you know, I feel like I'm being interrogated, you know, and it took a while, but we were able to say, look, no, we're not law enforcement, you know, everything that we're going to talk about has been adjudicated, and you know, it's all over and said and done. So again, I mean, it all boils down to trust, and it's all, you know, and being authentic to the subject, you know, and I know it's something that, you know, growing up in New York, I was exposed, I was around this world, and I understand it, you know, so I wasn't coming from sort of outside look, right? I kind of understood the world and understood, you know, where they were coming from, and the struggles that they went through. So that's sort of how.
Thank you so much for speaking with me. I
My
learned a
pleasure.
lot. So thank you for that.
Oh, of course, my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dana.
Thank you.